The next ingredient is hope or optimism. This is the state of having positive beliefs. It's about looking on the bright side and being able to visualize what success looks and feels like. It's also about having expectations and anticipation. If you lack optimism or hope, you become your own worst enemy. You'll defeat yourself in your own mind before taking any concrete action. In my experience, most of the things people worry about, or I worry about on their behalf, never materialize. So the excess time spent ruminating over how it can go wrong and hesitating and being fearful often just keeps you from making it happen, getting it done. There does come a time when the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. It's difficult to recognize when that's happening, but if you've surrounded yourself with the right people who will set you straight on these things because you fail to see it yourself, at time, the best thing you can do is just walk through it. Walk through your fear like it's mist, because it's just a monster of your own creation, and the only way to get past it is to walk through and see for yourself that you're okay. Having a healthy dose of optimism will help you weather the coming challenges. A truly optimistic person knows that challenges, like everything else, has two sides, and on the back of every challenge is an opportunity. Someone who's pessimistic will get lost in the challenge for a while and get bent out of shape at how bad it is, whereas the optimist will get to work on finding the opportunity hidden within. You know, there's an old saying that a pessimist will cry over spilled milk. But while he's crying, the optimist is already at work milking another cow. Challenge and opportunity go hand in hand. Within every opportunity, there is a challenge awaiting. And within every challenge is an opportunity waiting to be found. Keep that in mind, and when the hits come, you'll never stay down long. Instead, you'll recognize that you're in the midst of a challenge and get to work finding the hidden opportunities. Now, just like the other traits we've mentioned here, while it's important to be hopeful and optimistic, it's also important to be balanced. If you have an excess of optimism, you'll fail to see the perils that could eat you alive. Some challenges are really that bad, and finding the opportunity hidden might not be the best idea right away. This brings to mind an example of an investor who I've represented once who had a bank start a foreclosure against him. They had a commercial mortgage on 3 properties that he owned. He kicked off a lot of income, and he planned to retire off them one day. Anyway, there was a misunderstanding about the payment of property taxes on the property, and the bank was quick to go into overdrive and enforce the loan documents. Overnight, he owed them a ton of money, and they called the whole loan due. And while they're racing to take the properties from him, the bank had the right to appoint a receiver without notice to collect rents from the property. And the court appointed a receiver was walking around his properties demanding rent from his tenants. In doing so, he went from having a one-man band type of business to something that was operationally strong and could be sold. What happened was, with the receiver walking his property trying to get rent from his tenants stopped paying him rent. And so his plan was to collect the rents from his tenants and use it to bring the bank and get himself out of the mess. But overnight, his source of income was done. Now, this guy was a contractor. He had a successful commercial construction business, but it was essentially a mom-and-pop operation. He was a one-man band. He had some employees, but it was essentially him. In being in this challenge, he was actually on the verge of retiring in a few years. It forced him to put his business into overdrive because it was a moneymaker. He just didn't work it like a moneymaker. And he went from being a mom-and-pop shop to being a real legitimate business. And in the process, he earned enough money to get out of the mess. And then after that, he had enough money to basically make his business into something that an investor would buy. And he sold it for a lot of money. When he sold that business, he actually got enough money to pay off those mortgages. And so he owned those properties free and clear. Today he's living off the rents and traveling the world. So his opportunity came, but not for some time and not without dealing with some substantial challenges. The thing about being optimistic here was that as bad as it got, he was always hopeful that he was going to find a way, that he would have these properties and that he would retire off them. And in the end, he squeaked through. The next ingredient is cheerfulness and being pleasant. This is about being happy, good-natured, having a sense of humor, joy, cheerfulness. Who better to express that than Santa Claus? You know, the old saying, smile and the whole world smiles with you. This is about being a pleasant person to be around. If people want to be around you, then they'll naturally want what's best for you. They'll want you to get the deal or give you the tip that you can use to hunt down the deal. When you have a sense of humor and are pleasant, you enjoy the journey. When you have the correct levels of humor, you take your work seriously, but you take yourself less so. In lack, you're a grump that people will hesitate to be around. People will want to minimize their time with you, which will decrease opportunities that naturally come about from being around people. In excess, you're a pushover, wanting to keep things light when you should be getting serious and getting down to business. In balance, you have good humor, but it's with purpose. You're pleasant to get yourself in the door, but once you're in and it's time to get to work, you roll up your sleeves and you have at it. The uncontrollable. I said we were going to talk about this in the beginning. You know, sometimes you're deeply affected by things outside your control, and you can't avoid their effects. Things like property values. You have no control over that on the macro level, and you can't avoid it from deal to deal. For those things outside your control that you can't avoid, learn about them. Find out how they work. Observe the cycles. History often repeats itself, and to the extent it doesn't repeat, it often rhymes. Learning about cycles means not just looking at the current state of the market, but historical trends, going way back. In hindsight, there's so much more to see. How things work, what drives these things outside your control, like property values. It's no different from your own life. You know, often it seems chaotic in the present from day to day, but if you ever took time to take stock and review things that happened to you in hindsight, it often makes a lot of sense, right? If I only knew then what I know now, this is the same thing, and once you learn the patterns and cycles, you won't control how they play out, but you'll recognize them and be better able to position yourself and make the most of it. Suddenly, that chaos looks more like a pendulum that swings back and forth. And if it's a pendulum that swings back and forth, now you can watch it and time it and avoid the swings that used to otherwise knock you down. And instead, you can position yourself at the fulcrum of that pendulum, or at the very least be clear when it comes swinging through, knocking everyone else down. And as we close this out, we talked about working on the things within your control. We talked about how you can better deal with the uncontrollable. I just wanted to leave you with a few parting words. These are facts now. You do with them what you will. There's more deals out there than you'd ever want to do. Fact. There is more money to fund them than you'll ever need. There's more contractors to do the work for you than you'd ever use. Those are the facts. Now, what you do with that information, that's up to you. But that's the potential that's there for the taking. And with that, I want to thank you for listening today, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.